voice of Michael Stipe. There you go. And not only do I sing, but I also piss my pants on my own thinking about the chandelier and the football and the overhead projector.
Hello and welcome to the Collecting Addicts podcast, episode number 16. What a journey it's been. First up, this week, Formula One. Now, there's already been some argument on our little group chat about the fact there was nothing to discuss after this week's race. But I think that's completely wrong, because there's lots to discuss, don't you? Because it really was full of incident, but not the kind of incident that we want to be discussing. Over to you, Manish.
I have just read a tweet from Corinne Chandok, and Toto Wolff said that the race was boring. And he's apparently asked the FIA to have a look at boring races. And Corinne Chandok pointedly tweeted, didn't hear you saying very much in 2016, Toto. And I think...
Yeah. Go Corinne.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think I sound like a broken record, but there is a little balance that we need to achieve between entertainment and sport. And sport builds. And I think, I was just talking to a couple of people in the offices. Yesterday, they watched Everton versus, I can't remember, is it Southampton? The bottom line is there were two clubs.
Leicester.
Leicester. There are two clubs at the bottom of the Premier League, and they're fighting for survival right now. And that is utterly entertaining because there's a relegation here. There's something at stake. And it just sort of brought me back to this slightly weird place we're at with the sport of Formula One. Imagine you're sitting in a grandstand on a straight in Baku. What is the difference between an exciting and a not exciting race? If you're on a grandstand on a straight, what you see is cars going past very, very quickly. Williams actually going past at 344 kilometers an hour. You don't really know who's in the lead and you don't really know who's in last place because it isn't really like that. So what I would argue is creating an expectation that just says every single Grand Prix is going to be absolutely scintillating from beginning to end. It's the antithesis to enjoying it as a sport.
Yeah.
Sport sometimes produces these 0-0 matches, which are matches of attrition or whatever they are. And that's okay because it's going to build. And I just wish, especially team principals, wouldn't use the B word to describe Formula One. It's incredibly exciting. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
I think most of us can agree with that. I find the level of hypocrisy with utterances like that is difficult because I'm a bit of a Toto fan, a bit of a man crush on him sometimes. I do like him. But they talk about boring races and yet they all protect the jewel in the crown, Monaco, which delivers consistently very little year on year. But they view that as the apex of Formula One, but it is visually one of the most boring bits of sport that you'll see all year. What do you think, Neil?
Well, I have to say I'm rather embarrassed about my little bit off the mark prediction of Lewis being on the podium. So I'm sort of licking my wounds from that. Well, I didn't really like the bloody Saturday. Now I do this podcast, I have to be much more informed and much looking smarter on Formula One at least. And I tried to sit down and understand how that Saturday thing was working. And there was one sprint and then there was another sprint, but it didn't contribute towards the Sunday. I don't know whether stretching it over 3 days, which basically looks like the strategy of having quali on a Friday and getting more eyeballs onto the TV around the world so the advertising goes up and then the value of the company goes up. I'm not sure that really works for me. Maybe I sort of run out of energy by the Sunday. I'm like, oh, here we go, I mean, Adrian Newey is such a bloody genius. He's the sort of the Google of the internet. Maybe we should just sort of get rid of him, really.
Well, he signed up again. He signed up another contract.
All I would say is that people are aware of the fact that, if you like, the cadence, the rhythm of the weekend. Actually, I mean, how many times can you shake a champagne bottle and take a cork out And I think that there's something to be thought about in that way, that in a way having qualifying on a Friday, it is fantastic for the paying spectators. Weirdly, it's not television. The paying spectators feel that they're getting something. And then the paying spectators on Saturday feel that they're getting something. The problem is that the rhythm of the weekend is lost. I mean, you just cannot have spectacular qualifying on Friday, then spectacular qualifying for the sprint race on Saturday, then a spectacular sprint race on Saturday, then a spectacular Grand Prix on Sunday.
Yes.
The word spectacular starts to kind of slightly lose its meaning.
Can I offer a solution to this problem? It's very simple. It's called M1 Pro Car on a Friday.
Oh,
no.
Yeah.
The problem is for me that it's all about the visuals. It's the same cars doing the same things on the same corners.
Yeah.
So I think just bolt them all into a load of GR Yaris's and say that they're allowed to write every single one off. I don't know. Just do something. Mix it up. Can I ask one other question then? This bit of handbags between Max and George Russell, I thought was very interesting. Got to be careful what I say here, or I just get the Max army on my back. I don't think George has an army yet, or if he does, according to Max, they probably dress in pink anyway. So, but I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think we have now got conclusive proof that Max has a hybrid view of how you should race in F1. He can pull off or take on exploratory overtaking manoeuvres, but if anyone does that to him, he's not willing to accept it. I think Damon Hill's interview on Sky was quite superb, where he didn't do the obvious thing of just piling in on Max and saying, "Look, what's he on about?" He actually did that later on when he presented too much evidence not to. But what he said was, "Look, there's something that unites these great mercurial talents in the sport." And he mentioned Senna and Schumacher, and I think he's actually bang on when he said,
"Yep,
they just have a view that they're always right." And this is what I find really weird, because I find Max's reaction and the way that he went about it and the way he explained his thoughts pretty abhorrent. I thought, I don't like that at all.
No.
But in the context of what Damon said, I thought that's what makes him what he is. That's why he's going to be multiple world champion, because he's just so single-minded. He's been brought up from that big to not accept anything other than his way of doing things.
Yeah,
and I admire it, but my God, is it ugly to see sometimes? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think it is. It was.
That's right. Schumacher, isn't he?
Little bit more of Max on Saturday, and I think George handled himself really well. I think he refused to be bullied on track, refused to be bullied off track. I think he handled himself really well. It's odd. My boys quite often point this out to me on social media, so on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. For some reason, George doesn't get a great press. There's been the last year or so a little bit of sort of negative, which I personally don't get at all. I think he's a super bloke, lovely bloke. He doesn't come from a very, very wealthy background. He's there purely on talent and determination and grit. And he seems like a decent guy who is prepared to race very hard. And he did it last year with Max at Barcelona. That worked really, really well. So I think part of it, I suspect, was Max felt under pressure from Perez, and that was interesting this weekend that he couldn't get back past him, even in the race when he presumably had a fixed car. So I thought it was. It was an interesting weekend. I mean, Nick De Vries, or as he very sadly is now being called on social media, Nick Debris, which is really quite tough on him, poor bloke. He must be thinking, this seemed so easy last September in Italy, and now it just seems impossible. I can't do anything right. And one wonders, particularly in that team, how tough it will feel. So I really feel sorry for him. And Alonso, what has happened to Fernando Alonso? And can we have the real one back, please? I mean, first of all, on the radio, he was saying, I found a really neat trick with the brake bias on my car. Tell Lance. And Lance was saying, tell Fernando I won't attack him. If you forgot, this is Formula One. And then today, there's a report in Autosport I saw before we came on that said, oh, yeah, Fernando's saying, well, I'm going to help and support Lance in this because he'll be leading this team for another 10 or 15 years. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's who are you and what have you done with Fernando Alonso? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is bizarre. I think the makeup of the weekend is interesting because I found the Saturday a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I saw the incident in the sprint race. I didn't like much about it from Max's perspective. I didn't like, obviously, it's never a good look when you're yelling at each other in Parc Fermé. You know, we all know that's what you do in sport, but it's never a great look, is it? The interview afterward, again, didn't like what Max did. And I thought the icing on the cake, which clearly was for Damon as well, was when he gave that very, very obstreperous sort of shoulders down, surly interview about the sprint format, where he just went, "I think it's rubbish. We shouldn't be doing it. We're here to race."
Yeah.
And the way he came across was bad. But the message he contained in what he said, I agreed with. I don't think the sprint race works. I don't understand the need for it. Quite frankly, as Manish said, the cadence of a racing weekend from a spectator's point of view has been totally lost. It's a bit like trying to force the pace of Test cricket. It's a game. It's something that has to evolve over a weekend. And so you should, if you go on a Friday, you should see the cars testing. You should see the long runs. You know, there's no food for the real enthusiast anymore. It's become very gratuitous, and I think Formula 1 does this at its cost. Yeah. It has to be very careful that if you really want to put on some wham bam racing every single day, or every single half a day. It's a nil-sum game. I think it's thin under the wedge. How many other cliches can I come out with? I think you're gonna struggle to maintain that, because as Manish pointed out at the beginning, some races are just boring. They're going to be.
Yeah, they always were, weren't they? I suppose.
Yeah. And in the Football World Cup or the Olympics,
it would be nice if the cars sounded bloody better, though, wouldn't it? It would be okay in a way if it was boring, if they would have big fuck off 6-litre V10s in the back.
There is that, but I see again. I don't think they don't sound like the V10 cars, but nothing does. And when you go to a race physically, they still sound pretty bloody exciting to me. You know, if you go somewhere where there's noise ricocheting off the walls, they don't sound like a Yaris GR, to refer back to my friend. They really don't.
No, they don't. I love the idea of chucking them all in a 911 GT3 RS in fabulous signal colours, Smarties, and bombing around. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think if they want to break it up, it's very interesting. I was playing golf yesterday with someone, and they were saying that their 17-year-old daughter is really into the sport. And I like to play golf now and again. Everyone will tell you that I've got a terrible slice. But the idea of someone saying my 17-year-old daughter is really into Formula 1, well, I mean, they're doing their job, aren't they? That's a lovely statement to hear.
Yeah.
But then you're fearful for the sport that's being served up. That's the strange thing. Moving on. Next subject. This is a massive subject, and one that I was initially resistant to when it was written down. And that is lightweight cars. Oh. There's some really passionate voices here about lightweight cars, and I'm totally torn. So I'm going to sit here. By the way, I'm feeling a little bit rough today. I'm going to sit here and say to Neil Clifford, give us your passionate defence of lightweight cars.
Oh, I think it's everything. This is the best car category. It's my obsession. I don't really know why, because as I've said before, I'm not really a great bloody driver. I've been at Goodwood in a GT3 RS 3.8, blah, 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 and been overtaken by a Ford Mondeo sort of thing. So I'm a complete sucker just for the sheer engineering beardiness of the whole thing, whether it be the 3.2 Club Sport with the lack of central locking and you've only got a sun visor on the driver's side and the alarm's been taken out, and the sticker on the 996 GT3 RS, which is probably the number one little item that I remember reading that. When was it? 2010? No, 5. When did that 996 GT3 RS come out? And there was a sticker instead of 04. I'm like, oh my God, those Porsche people are just bloody brilliant, aren't they? The no rear seats, the car that I'd love to own there's a 928 GT Club Sport.
It's just called a Club Sport, no GT. It's called a 928 Club Sport.
Yeah. And I've had the GT, I've had the GTS, I've had the manual, I've had the auto. It's a shit car actually to drive. It's brilliant to look at, But I'd love that, the club sport version of that with those lovely D90 wheels with the little dish thing.
What was the weight-saving measure on the club sport that was very obvious to see?
Single wing mirror.
Exactly. It had one wing mirror.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's true.
There was also, and being a nerd, there was also a car called, and they only made about 12 of these. I think Ed will remember this one, that Derek Bell had as a daily. I think it was called a 928 S4 Special Equipment.
Yeah,
it was basically a right-hand drive club sport. And they gave Derek Bell one as his company car, and he just waxed lyrical about it. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I'm just being a nerd here, but I totally get it.
I mean, we've got a little subject coming later, which is linked to my obsession of these things. You know, the M3 Club Sports, or the CSL, sorry, it's those lightweight door cards, that carbon fiber lightweight door card. Everything about these little amateur racing track day special things is really right up my sort of lunacy alley.
But it sounds to me like you get off on what the engineering and the tech
is engineering
thrown at them, but you've not spoken about how they make you feel when you drive them.
Well, they do. I own a 964 RS, and I've had that car for 14 years. And I'm sure we will do the subject one day of the last tank of petrol before death. But if we do that chat, that is the car that I would be in, because it's it's 10 brake horsepower more. It's only the whole sort of blueprinted from factory thing. Didn't really make much bloody difference. I don't need any more than 260 horsepower in any car, frankly. But that car, because you know the sheer engineering effort that we put into it. It was slagged off when it came out. We all know in 91, 92.
My son, yeah.
None of the journalists liked it. It's too harsh for the UK road. How can they charge so much for nothing? Blah, 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 blah. But that car, you feel so alive driving it because it does feel light. And it does feel like you are completely connected. It's like getting in a Mark 1 Elise. It's like a mini F40. I mean, I could drive an Elise faster than an F40 because it just feels like you've just got in a little shoe. It's beautiful. And the whole Colin Chapman thing of just add lightness. He was dead right, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It's just much more enjoyment driving a lighter car anyway, putting aside the engineering elements.
Max Verstappen said this weekend about the modern Formula One cars. One of the problems he felt was this massive weight. When you go into a corner, he said the moment of the corner is so great, it basically knackers your tyres. And that's one other really, really great kind of advert for the pre-hybrid, much lighter cars. It's that movement there, how well you can control the car laterally. And there is just something to be said for, it's the Alpha 33. What did that weigh? Like 690 kilos?
Yeah.
It's only got a 2-litre engine or whatever with exactly, you're talking about 250 horsepower, but my God, does it go? And does it sound...
I mean, I'm a big believer or trusting in motoring journalists. It's why I adore Chris Harris so much. Because when you or Richard Meaden or any of the guys were writing about these cars, an Evo Car of the Year or whatever, I really felt I was there with it. I believed in it. I was the perfect customer in a way for those magazines. I went out and bought the car if it had 5 stars. I love all that.
I'd like to say something very pithy and cynical now, but
No, you shouldn't.
Don't trust me, but I think you were probably right to. Dickie's a great writer, and I think there is a community of people that wanted to tell you what those cars were like to drive. Chris is someone who's a real exponent of lightweight cars. He's got a strong history with Caterham, and I think when we think of lightweight cars, Colin Chapman's original Lotus 6 then to Lotus 7 design is probably what we're talking about in our heads. That's what we picture, isn't it? That open wheel car.
Yeah, it is. And I think no matter how well you think you do or don't drive, a lightweight car just feels better. It should feel better as soon as you get in and start to move it. It will just feel like there's less inertia, less effort is going into everything. And that just feels lovely. And I think those of us who have been lucky enough to driven Caterham 7s, let alone race them, There's something just wonderfully expressive and liberating and lovely about how they feel. You can translate what you feel and what you want it to do much more quickly and easily. And we all know why cars are heavier now because of safety. I mean, if you track, Mark 1 Golf GTI to a Mark 8 Golf GI, it's basically double the weight, pretty much thereabout. We were talking last week about 90s hot hatches and Citroen AX GT. I shared with you the picture of me actually drowning my brother's AX GT in a little Ford somewhere in Wales, probably 91, something like that. And that weighs 722 kilos.
Nuts.
And the rear part of the car, probably from the B, I'm not sure there was any metal in it. It was plastic. I said last week, a bit of hope and a few tears. They're just lovely to drive. And I think, so the modern equivalent, Alpine A110, I know it's sort of, there's a QI klaxon should be going off now. Oh, God, he's mentioned an Alpine A110. But it's a really nice car. You get in it and you start to drive it. If you go to a dealership which is based in a town, you don't have to wait to get out of town. They just feel lovely and they turn and the way the steering feels and you can feel stuff because the weight of the car. So, yeah, I just think, there's everything to say about them. We know why most cars are heavier, but I think there's everything to say about how lovely they are. It's a Caterham or an Alpine. I've got an old, Neil, you've got an old Mini, an original Mini. I've got a very old 1962 Mini. And it's just lovely and direct. It just feels...
What does it weigh? What does it weigh, Chris?
I think 1,000 kilograms.
A 1962 Mini.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about the Alpine.
No, sorry. Yeah, the 62 Mini is about 650, 700 kilos.
It's a brilliant car, the Alpine.
Yeah, really, really. And the Alpine's lovely as well. Yeah.
I need to add I'll tell you what, Edward, I've got too much to say on this. You say what you want to say, and I'll see if I can sum up afterwards because my brain's exploding here.
No, well, I added this in, and it is obviously some of the cars that Neil cited. You went for modern cars, Neil, because I think they obviously try and add lightness into some of these modern GT products, etc. But they're actually none of them are light, really, in by comparison. I have got the Renault Alpine written down here because I haven't driven one yet, but the people that have told me, even just go over a little a bump in the road and it sort of just pops over. You really feel that lightness in it. But when I drove Richard Tuttill's latest creation, the 911K, we went up the road and fuck me, this thing, 11,000 RPM, and when we were driving it, he said, "Do you know what you can feel?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" You can feel the lightness. And in all the inputs, the way that car feels, he's so right. And my father has got a big passion for Bristol engined cars. These are small 6-cylinder cars, but aluminium bodies, and by today's comparison, or in terms of power, you would think these things are slow. But they're not, because the engine's in such a lightweight package that they just feel amazing, from the 1950s, and they feel as fast by comparison of any modern car you could have fun with. And then I guess what you were saying with these Formula One cars, Manish, all the supercars that are coming to us that have got more and more power, they've got these hybrid systems in there. They're just getting heavier and heavier. And it'd just be nice to have lightweight focus on the cars that we can buy today.
Does anyone know what a Ferrari 296 weighs?
It's about 1650, 1700 with all the fluids and half a tank of fuel. It's probably more than 1.7. So
do you know the dry weight of a Countach LP 500 was 1,315 kilos?
Yeah,
actually 400 kilos lighter.
Yeah, but the Countach is probably quite. Sadly, it's a bad example. It's quite heavy for a car of its era. I mean, there were cars that were 1,000 kilograms then. Look, the Alpine's a really good, helpful vehicle to bring up in this discussion because I had one of those for 6 months. Sorry, I ran one. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Alpine. And it was a joy. Every time you got up, you'd be in a car that would... There's a lovely phrase that the Lotus engineers would call breathe with the road. Yep. It would breathe with the road. and the car just felt so nimble. It felt like its dampers and its springs were working the whole time, and it was just it was allowing itself to roll. It was a joy. It had the steering on it was good, but was power assisted, and therefore lost some of the advantage a very light car could have. But it was also awful in crosswinds. I mean, it was so bad on the motorway that you pretty much had to aim it where you thought you were going to go, and it would go where it felt like going. I can remember the first time in a modern car where I've halted a journey back from the north because I thought I don't fancy this. I'm going to wait till the weather gets better, and that's a modern car, right? So there are.
You can fix that though.
My explanation of the dichotomy of super lightweight cars is I love the way they make you feel as a driver. And Chris again used the word that I would choose, which is the lack of inertia. The idea that every input you make reaches the point that should act on that input faster and more clearly. And the reciprocal is true. What it feeds back to you as a human being is a much clearer message as well. And that's enjoyable. The first one is technically better. The second one, when it comes back to you, is that sense of I've got steering feel. That phrase I won't write because I don't believe it. But there's something out there that is steering feel. I just don't think it is called steering feel. But it's strange that quite often these super lightweight driving experiences, I think, are a bit flawed on the road because they mean that you don't have very good traction. You actually don't have much power, so you have to drive on momentum, which means that you're out of sync with all the other traffic on the road. And increasingly, if you're in a convoy and all your mates have got bloody fancy turbocharged Ferraris and Porsches and you're in a lightweight car, you might as well park it up because every time there's a gap, they'll squirt it and go, and you'll be there going, "Oh yeah, I'll catch you up with my steering wheel in a minute." So they're a bit out of sync. They're a bit out of sync with the way everything else works. And I also believe that, and this is a sad reality check. Most vehicle engineers and vehicle systems manufacturers are now so good at their jobs and so advanced that they've kind of cheated physics.
Yeah.
And if I gave you a car that weighed 1,000 kilograms from 1985 and told you to go down a road and back to back it with a car that weighed 1,700 kilograms now, you'd say that the modern car steered better, that it stopped better, that it gripped better, and most of all, that it felt more agile. And agility is a word that I think we absolutely use in conjunction with lightweightness. So I'm a bit torn. I love the way lightweight cars feel, but I think there are quite a few downsides to that. It's difficult, but I also remember from my car testing days that one of the things I'd always advise Cub road testers when we did those big group tests, you know, the Evo Car of the Year or the Autocar Handling Day thing, was there'd always be a Caterham. A Caterham would always get into these things because, rightly so, because as a driving device, they're wonderful. I'd always say to the young'uns, drive that in isolation. The worst thing you can do is drive a Caterham, then jump out of it and drive a 964 RS afterwards, because it will feel like a boat. Anything after a Caterham will feel like a boat. Nothing compares. So don't try and compare the two. You just really need to separate those things out. I think what this does, my summary on this awful monologue of mine is, I think you need both. That's always the solution we come to in these podcasts. I think if you only had a Caterham, that's potentially, you might be missing out on some stuff. And also,
I've tried living just with a Caterham.
That was my problem with owning. I've had a couple of original Alans Sprints. They're amazing cars. I mean, amazing. So fast, you can't believe it. That lovely little engine for a 4-cylinder engine is one of the best sounding little things. The problem is, I felt that I could die.
Yeah.
And if you got hit with anything in that, because I'm a shit driver, as I say a lot, but also because it's so small that no one bloody sees you, even if it is bright yellow, you are likely to lose your legs. And that's why I got rid of it in the end, even though as a driving device, as you say, Chris, it's not much to beat it.
Chris Cooper.
Yeah, so I've tried living with a Caterham, just a Caterham, and it's slightly hard work. But you may use expression that people at Lotus use, that a light car will breathe with the road. The Alpine definitely does that. It hasn't fallen into that trap, which lots of people these days assume is the right answer, which is making it too stiff. And a little bit of body movement and softness, the car will breathe. I mean, crikey, I drove a 992 GT3 Touring back from the Bicester scramble thing the other week down the A41. It was next to an impossible task because the roads are so bumpy and uneven. Whereas an Alpine would have just glided down it, but actually probably more enjoyable because of the way that it works. So I think if you can find a way of having something like a catering experience in your life, then it will keep the dream and the appeal of a softly suspended lightweight car. Even racing versions of caterings are still quite soft because it's that movement of roll and the way the weight moves forward and aft, which just gives you feeling. I mean, sort of, I agree with Chris. Steering feel. What do you mean? He said, but you can feel stuff through how the steering wheel moves in your hands. And I think lightweight cars just accentuate that. So I hope I'll always be fortunate enough to be able to have space in my small garage, the Neil's, for a very lightweight car. They're top.
I'll tell you that one thing that I think summarises this quite nicely as well. I raced a Lotus 23 at Goodwood a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, that was lovely.
And I mentioned it on this podcast. It belongs to Chris Goodwin, who was the guy that defined the modern era of McLarens, their driving dynamics. And I think they're some of the best cars I've ever driven. So he sort of started with 12C and he probably ended around 600 LT. So that bookends probably that era where there were some spectacular cars. And he bought the car because he wanted to understand what genuine lightness meant. His background was in racing, but he said, if I'm going to understand the dynamics of a really light mid-engine car, I better buy one. So he bought this thing and started racing it. And the bizarre thing is that if you drive this thing, the way it steers and the way it responds to steering inputs, you go, I've been here before. And it is, the DNA of that little car is in all of the modern McLarens, particularly for those lucky buggers that own a 675 LT. There is a DNA connection between your amazing vehicle and the little Lotus 23, because the bloke that defined the way your supercar drives got himself drunk on this little Lotus. So I
mean, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? It would be the only sort of positive I could see out of electric vehicles, that there was an electric version of the Lotus 23 for the road that had 400 miles range, and you could jump in it, and it felt like that. I know it's sort of maybe difficult because of the battery, I suppose, but that's what we want out of electric, about the future, maybe. Just you don't need to be 0 to 60 in 2.2 seconds, do you?
No. I totally
you want to enjoy the bloody thing.
Where's the carbon tubbed manual gearbox electric vehicle that's got 150 horsepower? That's what we're looking for. But sadly, those don't have headlines that sell in great numbers.
Yeah.
Right. The 2-car garage. My phone, by the way, just auto updated to the new iOS, and I have no idea what's going on.
Manish can read it out.
No, I got it.
You got it, have you?
It's 1980. This is not about me, by the way. It's 1985, and you're a rock star, restarting a solo career after huge success in the late 60s and 70s with a band. You have a huge country house and a home in St John's Wood, near Abbey Road Studios. But owing to rather frequent substance issues, you won't have a driving licence for a year. So 2 cars, but you can't drive either. You love F1, you love rallying, you love Le Mans, but you have to be driven. Love it. By the way, this is Manish. Of course Manish thought this out. Okay, Manish, you better go first because it's your baby.
So you remember that scene in Withnail and I when Danny, purveyor of very bad drugs, turns up and he talks about the bloke who's imported the cannabis and him going down. It's such a great line. He goes, the judge says to him, do you think it's the right thing to turn up in court wearing what you're wearing? Because the bloke's wearing a caftan. And he turns around to the judge and he says to the judge, do you think you look normal? Cunt gives him 5 years. It's just such a monumental bit of writing. It's actually the first C-bomb in Withnail and I. People remember it for Uncle Monty.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just imagining this poor guy who's kind of, he's a hybrid of all of these rock stars that we knew, just pawing at a car for a year, and he just can't drive it. So the two that I came up with were the Rolls-Royce Silver Spur limousine, the Robert Jenkel. It's 45 inches longer, and it's got the middle seats, the TV, the fridge. I even found one with an aerial. They were $196,000. And I can imagine if he didn't have a woman in a bikini in the middle seat. Yes, yes. If he didn't have a woman in a bikini, he'd just have his guitar.
Oh, yes.
What a car. Come on.
Yes.
Jenkel was the man. We need to talk about Jenkel at some point.
Yeah.
So, I just thought that was it. And the other one, it's got to be a Ferrari, hasn't it? But it's going to be a 412i.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just enough Ferrari for him to sit in the passenger seat, kind of pretend he's driven it coming out. And I think it would probably be red, but with tan leather. So the Jenkel, Rolly, and a Ferrari 412i.
I love it. The 412i, a manual and automatic, Manish?
I don't think he'd care. You know? If I dose you,
I don't think he'd notice.
What's the street name for the pill?
It's called the Embalmer, isn't it?
The Embalmer.
The Embalmer.
Balls, I'll swallow two of the fuckers and run a mile. Right, Edward, you go.
Well, I had the same bloody Rolls Royce. Are we on the same Google search terms? I'm going to change it though. It's going to have to change. So we can't have the same car. So I'm going to have a Lagonda Wedge.
Yeah.
Oh, you bastard.
Yeah. You better get Googling, Neil. And then obviously, so I Googled 1985 Le Mans results, and I don't know if I found the wrong results page, but there were no sort of GT cars either running that year, or there certainly weren't any that finished. So I was struggling to find, if I'm a Le Mans fan, struggling to find inspiration. And I didn't want to do a Ferrari. So I went rally as my inspiration. And I bought myself a Delta S4 Stradale.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Imagine being driven around in one of those.
Yes, but it's fine. I'll be all right, mate. I've had 2 of those pills.
Neil Clifford.
No, I'm not changing my bloody selection, Edward. You just stole one of them. But anyway, I would be getting. I've got this PA, and she's worked with me from 20 years since I had my first number one in like 67 or whatever on Top of the Pops. And she's got on a typewriter, and she's written a beautifully typed letter to Victor Gauntlet in the factory to request a personal appointment at Aston Martin, because you know what? He might not have a driving license, but he's going to go and have an immense amount of time building 2 custom Aston Martins. A year will go quickly because he's going to see Mick Jagger in Mustique, and he's got plenty of things sorted out for his time off driving. But he goes up to see Victor Gauntlet. It's peak Aston Martin, mid-80s. And he's gone for the Lagonda, and he's gone British Racing Green with green leather, with red piping, with a hand-painted red stripe down the side. The Series 2, but he's upgraded the engine, and he's upgraded everything inside and made some custom stuff with a drinks cabinet and a video in the back. Automatic, of course. And then he's gone, right, I'm going to have the best fucking Aston Martin you can make me. I know the X-Pack really came in 86, but they've got a prototype of the X-Pack. And they've already got this engine. I think it was called the 580X with the 4 48mm Webers on it, and the cams and the Cosworth pistons and the straight-through exhausts. And he's taken the Vantage X-Pack. He's got the prototype. He's got the first one, and he's matched it. He's got 2 cars matching the same. The dark, non-metallic, very important, British Racing Green, with the green leather, with the red piping. And it's obviously manual, and it's got no silencers. And his driver's going to poodle him around in it. and he's going to keep these two cars forever. Doesn't matter. He's got plenty of holidays planned anyway. He's going to be driven in the back of the Lagonda for scooting around Savile Row and German Street for his shoes and his shirts and his suits. And then he's going to be screaming around. Where's he got his house, Manish?
St John's
I
Wood.
imagine it would be somewhere in Hampshire.
Sorry.
See that?
Oh, he's gonna ignore the ban. He's gonna fuck it. He knows all the local coppers, so he's gonna be driving around in the Aston anyway. He's not going to be bothered about that. So two Aston Martins from Victor Gauntlet matching.
That was an out of body experience, Neil. I'm not sure you were aware that you were talking.
What did I say?
That was just pure stream of consciousness. That's how he wrote The Wasteland. Right,
he's a mega hero for me, Victor Gauntlet. Mega hero, probably the number one hero of mine from the 80s.
That's another discussion for the podcast. Chris Cooper. I'm not sure how you follow that. But maybe just read out the name of the two cars and then move on.
So the first thing I can say is I was pretty sure nobody would guess my two-car garage, and so that proved to be. So it's 1985. The first car is a car you'd never buy if you had to drive it, and it's a Mercedes 600 Grosser. You'd only buy one of those if you knew you had to sit in the back. So I think a Mercedes 600 Grosser would be the first car because you'd love sitting in the back of it. And when you could get to drive, I'd probably have the short wheelbase rather than the longer wheelbase one. I think that'd be a bit more fun. So 600 Grosser, first car.
Yeah.
But this guy is really, he loves F1. He loves rallying, loves Le Mans. If he can't drive to enjoy the cars that you would see there, he'd just want to go to all of these events. In fact, he'd want to go to more events than he'd ever been before. So the second car would be a Sikorsky S76 helicopter. Am I the only one who thinks that's a good idea?
I think that's a brilliant idea.
I think exactly how that person would think, if I'm honest with you.
There was no budget, exactly.
Budget.
I know.
You could get to all of these events. I'm wasted here. That's my two-car garage with no budget.
You are
a nice 85 Rocker.
You've also disappeared because your internet is from 1985 as well. I don't know how you follow that. Look, I've agonised a bit over this, but I think I've not met many rock stars, but those that I've met and the ones that I really believe are true rock stars are peacocks. And they don't try and hide it. They walk into a room and they want to be seen and they want everyone to know they're there. Some people can find that distasteful, but I love the honesty of it. And I just love the fact they just walk in and I'm here, I'm the man. And I think this is why you've got to start looking further afield with your cars. I'm not, a stretch roller. There's other people with stretch rollers. Merc 600s, other people with Merc 600s. I think a Ferrari 412 is going to stand out. And I think if you turn up in a Lagonda, you're going to stand out as well. But I think if you turned up in all of those cars and I turned up in my Panther 6, the six-wheel Panther, I don't think anyone's going to look at you because I'm going to be there going, lads, I've got 4 front wheels and that was all that matters. I've got
Robert Jenko again.
It's Jenko.
Yeah.
But I think the Panther 6 is the ultimate rock star car. It was made for rock stars. It wasn't made for any other reason. It certainly wasn't made to go down a road. Can you imagine it in the truck grooves on the M4? It shit itself and fire itself into Hereford. So I think it has to be a Panther 6. But the problem is the Panther 6. Is it a sports car or is it a bit of a tourer? I've never driven one. I don't know. I think it's sold. So it's my sports car. So I need something a bit big as well. And I think if you've got a Panther 6 to turn up in, then you just need the best saloon car on the planet to sit in the back of. And that at the time was a Mercedes 500 SEL, a W126 that had gone to AMG, had the Hammer engine and everything else done to it. So from the outside, it looks fairly ordinary, but inside it's got a telly, a lap dancing pole, 700 horsepower, whatever they gave it. So for me, it's Panther 6 and a 500 SEL AMG.
Bulletproof.
Love it.
Oh dear, here we go. This might offend some of the design community, particularly when you look at the people that are judging the aesthetics of what we're about to talk about. What's the worst spoiler ever fitted to a road car?
Oh, that's been a bit more detail added there.
I think I specified that in the first message I put on the group.
I think
So I'll ask you last, so you can scurry around and find a new answer.
No, I've got lots written down.
Chris Cooper.
So anything you put on the car yourself is going to be the worst spoiler ever seen on a car. They're never good. Sorry, anybody who was it? Halfords don't do it anymore, but whoever was before Halfords was an accessory shop years ago.
RGA, Richard Grant Accessories.
Richard Grant, yeah. They were spoiler-tastic, so no, that's not good. Anything that Mansouri put on a car, that's not good. But actually, I think the worst spoiler to put on a car, because if it's not on the car, I actually quite like it, is the Mercedes AMG 45S. You put the spoiler on the car with the silly wheels and the blacked out windows, it looks abhorrent. You take all that off, it's actually quite nice. So for the sheer, oh my God, what have they done? It could be so much better. The spoiler on the back of an AMG 45S. Sorry, Mercedes, and all those people who like those cars. Yeah. The car's great, the spoiler's not.
I totally agree. Neil Clifford.
I made a decision to buy a car, and then I sold it because of the spoiler.
Good.
That's got to be quite. This gets the nub of it, isn't it? There used to be a time when cars went down in value when you bought them. Now they seem to go up.
It's coming back. It's coming back.
The preacher of doom. I'm sure you're right, Ed. But in 2010, there was a car that came out, and I had a massive love affair with BMW. I could never really afford them when I was really young, and then I managed to get myself that E30 M3 Sport Evo, and I did all that. And then I had a CS. Actually, CSL came later, but someone offered me for 30 grand less than list the E92 M3 GTS. And they came out at about 120 grand, I think. As I remember the Chris Harris article in Evo, that it's not as good as a Porsche, and if it was 75 grand and they made 1,000, then Porsche would be shitting themselves. But no, it's too bloody expensive.
And too heavy.
Heavy. But I got this car, orange, which is a little bit inappropriate as well. It shouldn't have been bloody orange. It even had an orange engine.
They were all orange, I think, weren't they?
They were. They
only sold 5, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I had one of them. I think it was about 115, 120 grand new, and I was offered it 300 miles, 95 grand. And I thought, actually, what can be better than a lightweight? So you had all the sort of weirdo stuff of the Perspex windows and the no rear seats and all that other malarkey, roll cage. Of course, a roll cage adds bloody lightweight, adds weight. But I remember this car coming off the trailer at my house, and I'm like, oh my fucking good God, what is that spoiler? It's literally like it's not even Halfords, it's someone's dad in their shed has got a lathe. You remember those people in the 70s that had lathes in their shed and used to make bullets or weird shit in their shed? Well, this spoiler was made in a shed in Stuttgart, wherever BMW. I suppose they're Munich, aren't they? Yeah. And I thought, fuck, I can't drive around in that. And I kept it for a couple of years, did about 100 miles on it, thinking, oh, this car's... Actually, I did sell it for more than I bought it, but I was just too embarrassed to drive it unless it was at night. It's a really, really shit
100 miles in a car. I don't think 2 years.
BMW have not really done many good spoilers. Maybe the original CSL or Batmobile, maybe. They're not good at spoilers. This one is particularly bad. But do you remember the 3.2, not the CSL, but there was a CS?
Yeah.
That had a really fucking dreadful spoiler on it as well at the back. So that would be the car.
That was I know the one you mean. That was
Remember?
That was awful. That was an option, but it was bloody
skinny little thing.
Yeah, God, it was a 330i or something, wasn't it? With a
I had one of those. I had the wheels nicked off it in Bristol.
And also, if you bought an M3 E46 CS, you could buy an optional
That
optional
spoiler
that went. Jesus, that dark was a lovely colour, that blue purple colour.
Yeah, that was a really bad spoiler.
I've had a bit of a moment there. You're right, that was horrific.
But that GTS, they're now about 200 grand. Those bloody orange. It's got an orange engine. I mean, what the fuck's that all about?
And if you drove it in a straight line now, it gets smoked by a 320D. You couldn't pull a skin off a rice pudding.
When that was being backed off the transporter, Neil, and you were thinking, God, that thing looks awful. Were you there with your legs out and a dressing gown wearing Crocs?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. If I'm not at work, I am in a dressing gown wearing Crocs.
I wonder what the driver thought of you.
Yeah.
Match made in heaven, probably.
Who's bought this idiotic orange car with a shit spoiler on the back?
The idea that you had to sell it is very honest. Manish, what's the worst spoiler you've seen on a road car?
Two worst spoilers, one in a movie, one in real life. I really hated the Ford Sierra Cosworth turbo pram thing.
Did you?
I hated that wing. It looked like something off the back of a Sainsbury's trolley with a little pillar to keep it in place. I thought it was so ugly. I always hated Sierras. That just made them even uglier for me. Sorry. And the other one is that front wing on the Cannonball Run Black Lamborghini Countach.
Yes.
Yeah,
what is that about?
Yeah, that's quite
right? Just what? And the thing is also the pillars are kind of facing forwards. So you have this funny front. What does it do? What does it do to the car? You get such fantastic front traction going down a desert road in I don't know where, and it's only that thing. I mean, how long? 3 inches? 3 inches of wing? 6 feet by 3 inches. I mean, how much downforce do you get from that?
Actually, it's a good point. The Countach is probably the most put upon car when it comes to having shit attached to it over time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Edward Lovett.
No, are you? I'm going last.
No, of course you are. Sorry, Chris Cooper.
I've already been. Well, what I was going to add was...
You've already been.
Oh.
Yeah,
what you've already been. Sorry, okay, right. So if you want to add this, by all means add.
So what I was going to add was we've all interpreted worst spoiler as effectively a rear wing. And there are some horrific front splitter things. When, Monkey, you remember when we raced that Caterham at the Nürburgring 24-hour race? When Caterhams are still allowed in that race. Caterhams have got quite a lot of front-end lift at high speed. It's not a good feeling. And a few places on the Nürburgring where there are sort of jumps. In fact, the worst one for a Caterham is probably not a jump for a normal car. It's on the Dottinger-Hoe straight, just gone that long straight on the old Nürburgring. Near the end, there's a left kink, and then there's a bit of a bunny hop jump just into a dip before the last bit. The Caterham would take off on that. So unless you were pointing in the right place, you would take off and end up in the green stuff, which is not a good outcome. So people have been there in previous years, decided, I know what we'll do. We'll put a front wing, like a single-seater front wing, on a Caterham, because that will sort it. I mean, we thankfully never saw them all weekend, but it must have had 30 miles an hour for top speed and probably a bit of lift in it. So, as I said, anything you put on a car...
Do you remember our highly technical solution to that problem?
I can't. What was it?
We fitted a front number plate.
We did, because that actually worked. And because it basically stopped air going underneath the car. I mean, everybody thought it had drag, but it didn't. It worked. Yeah, those are the days.
No, we fitted it. So, it's interesting hearing those because I love it when my memory's jogged by what you lot say because I hadn't thought about the things you were talking about. Not Edwards though, because he obviously had to change his because he's done a racing car because he didn't really.
No, I haven't.
Which is why he was asked to leave so many schools. So I think I've gone through this, and this is not meant to be an absolute dig at a particular car company. There was a vehicle released a couple of years ago that when I saw the pictures of it, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It's the Aston Martin F1 edition of
Alonso. That's God. How do we forget that? That is it.
I couldn't believe it.
This is it's got an upward curve on the edges.
Yes, exactly. Bad.
It looks like all of us sat down with 8 bottles of Chablis, a Sharpie, and some paper, and said, "Right, how can we make this car look sharp?"
Yeah.
And I just don't. I just don't understand it. And I also, just to show you how wrong we are and what a little ivory castle we live in, it's been a massive seller for them. They can't build them fast enough. The customers absolutely love them.
You imagine how good it would have been if it would have been good, though.
I know, but the spoiler is just what. Oh, anyhow, the idea that Aston Martin should have a spoiler, and Aston Martin shouldn't have a fucking spoiler, should it?
Yes.
It should.
No.
It should just be.
Look at your orange.
A tiny little lip like the Vantage.
Yeah.
You know,
somebody designing
like the Victor. The one-off Victor. That is one of the most elegant hypercars ever.
Yeah, that is based on the modern track car.
Yeah, from the Vulcan.
The Vulcan, sorry, yeah.
But it's all got all the elements of the wheels, the little lip. You know, it's a.
You're quite right.
It's manual. That's the most gorgeous hypercar that's probably been made.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Right. So we've done.
Well,
oh God, love it. Right. Now, what have you been Googling?
No, I haven't. I wrote so many down last night. Well, first of all, obviously, we're going to have to do another session on the best spoilers. It would only be fair to the spoilers to do that.
Yeah.
I have got M3 GTS written down because that wasn't very good. But we talked a few weeks ago about Bangle design, and I think there was another design we're talking about. And as Neil said, you know, give it all time, and it in most cases it comes together. And when you're looking at original factory fitted spoilers, they've all aged quite well. Even the really radical ones. Plymouth Roadrunner, things like that. You know, F40. But I have got a couple just to add in the mix that are shit at different price ranges. The Zenvo. That's one of them with that thing, the dancing wing. Convertibles with rear spoilers. So a CLK DTM convertible with a rear spoiler on it. That's just all wrong.
It should be illegal, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Honda, the latest Honda Civic Type R with the sort of scaffolding on the back looks pretty atrocious, but there is a winner. And unfortunately, the car it was added onto also looks shit as well. But it's the Chrysler Crossfire.
Possibly the worst car ever made.
It is total dog shit, and they put a spoiler on the back of one of them as well to make it look even worse.
Yeah,
I think you can have the Crossfire. That really was terrible. But one special mention as well. You're quite right about convertibles. You're quite right. Convertible spoiler doesn't work. There's a particular spoiler, and I'm sure there's a few people here will resonate with them. There's a particular spoiler Porsche did as a Tequipment option on a 991 that I often see. It's like a aerofoil that comes off the boot lid.
Yeah.
It's so clearly doing nothing.
Yeah.
It offends me greatly. I don't know why. It just looks shite. I can't imagine looking at that and thinking I want that on my car.
The general sort of Tequipment aftermarket body or sort of non-factory body kits generally just don't work on a Porsche. They're trying to make them look like a GT3, but they don't quite hit the mark.
Yeah.
The great irony being that the first 996 Gen 1 GT3, they didn't have any money to do anything, so they took the Tequipment body kit, and that was the body of the GT3, the first one.
Yeah, it was.
I'll find a photo of this.
They did it the other way round. Didn't they do GT3 first, then make it into an aero kit?
No, they took the wheels and the body kit from the Tequipment. The wheels came straight off the Tequipment as well. They've admitted that. Anyhow,
I'll find some photos of this car. It was a car that was for sale a couple of years ago with a company called Ashley Nichols, and Dick Lovett sold this car new, but it's a 993 Cabriolet in yellow with yellow wheels, and it still had the Dick Lovett order form on it, and the owner, and I think Dick Lovett fitted it. It wasn't done at the factory. Had a 993 RS Club Sport rear spoiler fitted on it.
It's still for sale.
It is it?
59,995.
Okay.
But you know, that car is almost so bad that it's cool.
Yeah, I agree. And with the yellow wheels,
It's one owner. It's got the yellow dials as yellow dials on the dash. I've looked at it about 100 times at very silly times at night on piston heads. It's actually almost cool to turn up at the Ace Cafe on Porsche night in that car.
It might not be for sale by the time this podcast is published.
Why wouldn't you just have it, take the wing off it, paint the wheels silver? You've got a nice car.
I know, as Neil says, it's too cool now.
As it is, and say, one previous owner brackets beekeeper, close brackets.
Yeah. It's one owner from new, still same owner.
Right, we're now going to offer you some music selections, and there is a bit of a theme this week, which was set by Neil Clifford. It's a bit horrific, this thought. Music to sing along to in the car. What's a tune that you just like to belt it out at the windscreen, fleck the windscreen with spittle as you demonstrate to only yourself and whoever's in the car with you that you really can't sing? Neil Clifford, I suspect, this is judgmental, but I suspect you don't have the crispest of voices.
I don't. I've awful bloody. My whole family, not one of us can hit one note. It's awful. And actually, one of my biggest regrets that not being. Wouldn't it be lovely to be able to sing and play the guitar? That's another thing I can't do.
Yeah.
Normally, I only pick one thing. I hope you've noticed that I don't sort of flap around like Ed. I try to sort of answer the question directly, but I couldn't conclude. I've got two. And I'm going to start with not my favourite one, but Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a song. It's an anthem of anyone that was at school doing music lessons in the 70s. It's what my teacher would bang on, even showed us the video about 100 bloody times. That's an incredible piece of modern opera, isn't it?
But Neil, I mean, if you say you can't sing, you have to go and pick a piece of music that spans 4,000 octaves, don't you?
No, that's true. But it's the only acceptable place, unless you're in a choir, to be able to sing in a car on your own. But the one I would choose, and this I won't paint the whole story, but it's the moment in my life, and my friends who are listening to this will remember it, where I laughed the most ever. Was a company conference in 1991, and it involved skipping, an overhead projector, a chandelier in a 17th century manor, and a football. And you can just imagine what happened to the overhead projector, the chandelier, the football. But we were dancing to REM and Shiny Happy People. And it's just a fantastic bloody song. I would give one of my parts of my body, maybe not a limb, but something else, if I had the voice of Michael Stipe. There you go. And not only do I sing, but I also piss my pants on my own thinking about the chandelier and the football and the overhead projector. So that's my choice.
That's lovely. Edward, you can go last because you've got to find another one.
No, I don't.
Right, here we go. Manish, bamboozle us.
No, very simple. Simon and Garfunkel's Boxer.
Ooh.
It's such a great piece of music. And the great challenge with this is the Lila lies at the end. They all get louder and louder, but it suddenly just stops. So you get la 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 la, and that's what you have to do. You have to guess the la 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 length.
Simon and Garfunkel, my God,
yeah,
amazing.
There's another wardrobe opened. Right, Chris Cooper, you'll hear this in 10 minutes' time.
So, hands up, who hasn't sung "Angels" by Robbie Williams in a car? The whole world must have done that. You haven't sung
No.
Everybody sings that. Everybody's had a go at singing "Angels" by Robbie Williams in the car. I remember when it has really. Must have been the summer of '99, because it was the first album he released as a single singer. Summer of '99, and I had it would have been a CD in summer of '99, and I had it would have been a Mark IV Golf GTI in green, not a great car, 8 valve, not 16 valve. And it was the first proper year I was racing in Caterhams, and I just loved the whole thing about going testing everywhere. and I'd drive everywhere with that CD, and that would come on, and I'd just sing it the whole time. I thought everybody did. Is it just me? It's just me.
Well, Chris, sometimes you need to keep things to yourself. This might have been one of those occasions. So, but Robbie Williams' Angels is now being added to our list.
It's a great car singing song.
Good song.
Do you know what? I think there's a lot to be said for Robbie there, because I'll explain why I think that afterwards. Edward, what have you decided to go for?
I can't believe you said I flap around, Neil. That's really unfair. Well, not many people know this, but I should be a recording artist because I've got one of the best voices no one's ever heard. And in a car, I'm in tune, and I'm it's mind-blowing, really. And out of all the fucking songs in the world, how is it we can come up with the same song? But actually, it's probably, Neil, you're right. It's probably not about the song. It's about the singer themselves. Because REM, I can sit in a car and I can sing them all. I think it's brilliant. So I'm gonna go with Shiny Happy People as well. We'll just that we can't have 3,000 songs on our list as well. I'm going to have to clear some out soon.
Okay, blimey, that was awful. I totally get the REM thing. I think part of the reason why REM appeals is not just because it's really brilliant, simple songwriting. It's that the range of his voice is vaguely achievable for the bad singer. So you don't feel that you've got to throw yourself around. So even because the fact is that we're all embarrassed by our own singing on our own in a car. That shows how shameful most of our singing is. That you're actually embarrassed at what you're hearing, not for the people in the car with you. Which is why my choice makes no sense whatsoever. Because there are certain tunes that will come onto the radio, or I'll put them on a playlist, or they'll come up in a shuffle situation that I love. But I did some road testing on this yesterday. There are some tunes that I just adore, but I don't sing along to them. I just enjoy them as bits of music, or enjoy them as tunes, but maybe I can't even attempt to get anywhere near the vocal, or it's just too embarrassing. So, for example, I love Van Halen Jump. We've discussed that before. It's a fantastic tune, but I don't try and sing it. It's not a sing-along tune. So for me, the ultimate sing-along tune, whenever it comes on, and I can't get anywhere near it, is Elton John's Rocket Man. I just find myself wanting to sing. It's a song that makes me want to be able to sing. Because it's just it's just a gorgeous thing, and it just climbs, and I find myself. I do sing along to it terribly, but I do anyway. So there you go, Elton John, Rocket Man for me.
Beautiful.
Right, that wraps up.
I think Manish, have you got one or not?
Yeah, Boxer.
Sorry.
It hasn't changed in the last 45 seconds.
No, fine, okay.
Deary me, Edward. So that wraps up this week's collection of shite that's shaped as a podcast. And I need to apologise for last week that I bullied my way into saying that a particular Alpina was an automatic when in fact it was a manual. So I owe Neil Clifford an apology for that. And he should enjoy it because it's the last fucking one he's ever getting. And I hope that you'll join us next week, and I won't feel the way I feel right now. Thank you very much for listening. See you next week.